more over by Fort Dodge. I was seeing some, and I'm
Oh,
north of there,
okay.
so yeah, I don't
Okay.
know. We hope not. Yeah, they
Yeah.
don't- it's must weather must be super hard to predict because they're wrong a lot. So, all right. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm doing a recording, and we had several that wanted to have the recording. Carolyn is going to tell us a little bit about herself, and she's going to tell us about this awesome activity that she has worked on, and we'll go from there. Thanks, Carolyn, for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. And just jump in if as you have questions. I present pretty informally. The spending game was first developed by a field specialist for Iowa State University Extension and Outreach, but it had gotten kind of dated with some of the, not so much the categories, but maybe the individual spending decisions. So I think it was like a year ago or so, I adapted it. And then I had students in one of my classes kind of help me update it as well. And then I've been offering it a little bit of everywhere. So I feel like I've gotten good feedback on it. So this is me. I teach classes at Iowa State is my day gig, I call it. And then my side gig is outreach and extension for the Evelyn K. Davis Center, which is at DMAC. I also provide financial counseling for Iowa State in partnership with Extension and Outreach. So I use it, I use the spending game in my personal finance class the first week of classes in like the introductory module. I think it's really good as like an icebreaker, kind of to help participants or students start thinking about what we're going to be talking about. And it's a really easy way to start introducing financial education because there's no specific dollar amounts. So it's kind of like almost like a fun way to start talking about it. I generally lead with this as an icebreaker and then lead in to specific content, especially if I'm being asked to present in a community somewhere or with different student audiences. So it's like the beginning icebreaker activity and then follow up with what they wanted me to provide. And everywhere I go and speak, they ask me for a little bit something different. So this is the game, and I did put it in the chat box. So you should have the PDF version and the Word document. This is not like proprietary to me or anything, so you can take the Word document and adjust it however you want. In fact, that's the part I like the most about it. You could really change up some of the categories, or I'm going to kind of show you what I do as I'm talking through the slides. But I do try to print it so that they can lay it out, so they can see all of the choices as we're working through it. But then I have a slide set where we go through each of the categories. That allows me to kind of, sneak in a little bit of teaching or education as I'm working through the categories, especially if it's something that I want to highlight or a concern I've had with a particular audience. But for the first round, that's where we kind of start at. And I would say another way to use this, especially if you can't print a lot, would be to think about having students pair up where they have to make their spending decisions together, which is actually quite fascinating. Or thinking about, I have students that are in new relationships or roommate conflicts. This can be a way to see how someone else makes their spending decisions, which sometimes clears up conflicts like, oh, I thought they were going to choose the same thing I would choose. So it's kind of like an easy way to do that since there's no dollar amounts in there. So if you have that in front of you, then I'll just kind of work through it like I would in a workshop setting or in a class setting. So just explaining, most of us don't have like unlimited money. We have, a certain amount, and that's going to kind of drive our decision making, whether we can make all the decisions that we want, or sometimes we have to make some tough decisions. But this game just kind of, it's oversimplified, but very easily kind of helps you kind of figure out what's important to you. especially in terms of if I don't have enough to pay for all the things that I want, I kind of have to make some tough decisions in different categories. So for round one, as you're playing the game, you have 25 tokens. And the tokens are just like the little boxes. And you'll see as we kind of work through how you're spending your tokens. And you can, I always have to say this, but you can make your adjustments as we go through. You can go back and change it. You know, you can erase it. I always say anything that I hand out in my workshops or classes, like this is for you to take home. This isn't for me to have. So you can make notes and put on there whatever you want. And there really isn't anyone that can help you with this process. It's really for you to decide. This is your money, and how do I want to spend it? So the first one, I kind of talked through housing, you know, depending if it's a class or a workshop, who the audience is, what I might highlight. And you can see there's no dollar amounts. It's just, and it's not really comparable, you know, to like what real expenses are, but just in terms of what's more affordable, what decisions could I make if I didn't have enough money? And actually, I've had some pretty interesting experiences with this in different audiences where, especially with thinking about how could I save money on housing, some students right away are like, hey, I could move back home. I could make some decisions there. I could share housing. And some students right away are like, that's just not an option for me. So I'm going to have to find other places to cut where I'm going to spend my tokens. And as many as possible, I have pictures of my own children's apartments so that maybe they'll even recognize something that's similar to where they're at. And the utility expense, we talk about that. I think mainly in terms of recognizing if they aren't already paying for utilities, what utilities they might be paying for. Because some students are in student housing or parents or guardians are paying. So kind of thinking, looking forward to what utilities, what might be included in that category. Communications, again, talking through all of this and how that can look different depending on where you're living and how you're sharing with family, how you're sharing with your roommates. Also dependent, you know, if you're trying to work or do school from home, what that can look like. And then talking about ways to like save money in that area. If you're going somewhere that has the free Wi-Fi, depending on my audience, I could talk about the Lifeline phones. Like there's all kinds of other things I can add into any of the categories. And maybe can already think about ways that you would adjust it for your audiences. Furnishings, I just use my own kids as an example. And I talk about, you know, I've housed 3 adult children myself, and we pull from grandmas, grandpas, aunts, uncles. I have a colleague that her entire apartment is in Eva's apartment now in Ankeny. And how that can save money instead of buying something new or thinking of more affordable ways to get what they need. And then that does allow me to talk about rent to own financing. And then sometimes I'm talking about why families might need to use that and how that becomes a really high priority payment so that they don't come and take the item back if they missed a payment. So also kind of educating on what other families or households are experiencing. I kind of build that in each of the categories. I talk briefly about health insurance, kind of depending on what kind of feedback I'm seeing from the students as I'm talking about it. And sometimes we have to spend a little bit more time here. And sometimes they're just not in a position where they're really thinking about this yet, but always highlighting that age 26 and the protections with the Affordable Care Act, I always think is important, and kind of talking a little bit about it. And then car insurance coverage if they have a car, because some students do not bring a car to campus, or some high school students don't have a car. And then I always have examples of this high risk drivers. So I had a student that had a few accidents, a few speeding tickets, and I have to say it was the highest monthly premium I'd seen. It was over $250. And her family did split her off from the household because it was raising all of their policies. So she had to go get her own policy. So we talk about that a little bit, what that can look like. And then renters and homeowners, especially with high school and college, I'll talk more about the renter's insurance and the importance of that, especially if it's required and the landlord force places a policy that it doesn't cover their own personal belongings. And then I give examples of like how much it is for my own kids and how it's gotten more affordable each year. And I say, this is where my daughter lives in Ankeny. And she didn't really think about, she didn't look at the same things that I would look at when she chose this apartment. So sometimes I share stories from that too. Then I try to make sure that savings is on there, but I talk about, if it's $5 a month or $5 a paycheck or $10, whatever it is, thinking very small for students that you can save a little bit in case something happens that you need to pay for. But I do have some students that are contributing to like a Roth IRA. So I kind of just see how that conversation goes as to what I talk about there. And then I always throw myself under the bus with this one because I'm like, all of my money goes to eating out because I love eating out. I don't like preparing food. I don't like the food that I prepare. And then usually that gets them kind of laughing and then they're sharing some stories sometimes where they like to go. And then we could talk about coffee, tea, all the energy drinks, talking a lot about energy drinks now. That seems to be even more popular than coffee. So kind of just see where it goes. And then transportation. In Ames, it's easy to talk about this because they have a lot of ways that they can save money on transportation. And then, I like to talk about safety a lot. So I talk about how Uber and Lyft are so very important to keep you safe, but Moonlight Express can also be a great way to stay safe, save money, and can be quite entertaining. So I always try to like build in resources. No matter where I'm at, I will try to find a local resource. If I'm in the Des Moines area, I'll talk about DART. Sometimes I talk about rideshare vans if I'm talking to students that are looking at a lot of internship experiences. So this depends. How it kind of shows you how easily you can adjust it to whoever you're talking to. And then recreation. This is sometimes where I'm talking about what I hear in the financial counseling clinic. There's always concern for, oh, when my friends go out, I feel like I have to go out. If my roommates are going out, I feel like I have to go out. So I encourage them, like, you can be the person saying, hey, what if we stayed in and ordered a pizza or we made something and then maybe we kind of limit how many times a week we're going out. I always say, like, if one person says something, I can almost 100% guarantee there's at least one other person in your group that is feeling the same way. So if you say it out loud, they're probably going to join you. And then it kind of helps everybody to start talking about it or thinking of, does anybody know where the meal deals are tonight or where they're at? And there's probably someone that knows something for every single night of the week. How can we kind of build that into our schedule, our entertainment schedule? Or I'll talk about dating expenses, how to kind of navigate those challenging conversations. And then like the streaming, sharing with family, all the student discounts as well can sometimes be helpful. I've been hearing them talk more about like the vacation travel, spring break, and how they're planning for that, or that's the first thing they need to cut, or how they even get together and figure out cheaper ways to do breaks, especially once they're juniors and seniors. Not as much when they're freshmen and sophomores. Clothing, which is really easy because it's really trendy to do thrifting. So that's always kind of easy to talk about. And then sometimes they'll talk about fast fashion and how they're trying to avoid kind of making that situation worse. I do talk about borrowing clothes too. If you have something that you're only going to go to once and you need a dress, do you have a friend you could ask? I always say they could come to my house too because I've got a whole closet for my two girls. Then we talk about laundry and how much that can cost or how we could save money going to a laundromat sometimes, which some students don't think about going to like a commercial laundromat. So I'll talk about how they could save money doing that. Personal care. I always use myself as an example with hair products. I know Shelly and I were talking about that the other day. So thinking about those things. And then this is where I've kind of shifted my focus to the sports betting because it's become a concern with my students. And then pet care, hearing different stories, students needing to use student loans because they have a $4,000 vet bill. I heard just the other day someone had a $15,000 vet bill. So it's something I'm trying to talk more about, that can be a tough decision, but there are people that can kind of help you through that if you need to. And sometimes it's hobbying, but I would say those last ones are the ones I hear more frequently. And then we kind of talk about, how they felt. Did they have enough tokens? And most of them with the 25 tokens are pretty good. I have used this before with like a refugee immigrant audience. And one gentleman, he was an Afghan refugee, was like, I have 13 kids. I can't cut anything. So he didn't have enough tokens for the first round. And I agreed with him. Maybe this game is not for you, sir. Maybe that could be very difficult to think about. But this is where I introduce kind of what I do as a financial counselor and saying this is generally when I might be meeting with someone, something has happened, their income has been cut, their hours have been cut, someone's lost their job, their financial aid status has changed, and now we need to give up 10 of the tokens. And I will say it gets really, really quiet during this. And sometimes I see they push it away. It's just not something they want to think about. Or there's some students I can see that they do this rather frequently, and it's really easy for them to shift everything really quickly. So I just kind of watch what's happening as they're making these decisions. I think if you have students pair up as well, then this is where the interesting conversations happen. They've already been pretty interesting because they had to make all of those decisions together. But now when they have to figure out what to give up, that's where I hear some really great conversations and strategies and ideas and how they can work together. So I think this is my favorite part. But then I do also talk to them about, this is fun, it's a game, and we can laugh, but recognizing there are families and households that are making these tough decisions like every day. They're making those decisions right now. Someone's lost their job, someone's had their hours cut, especially with students, their status has changed with financial aid. So that might even lead us to talk about other options or other things they could consider to get help with that. And then we just kind of like debrief from there. How did they feel about it? Usually there's at least a couple students that'll say what was really hard or what was easy or how they felt doing it or who they want to take it home and kind of go through the same activity on their own with their roommates or their partners or family members, or could I take an extra copy and share that with someone too? So I feel like I've heard really great conversations from it. It's always led to opening like expanding the conversation into other things that would be helpful for who's in the workshop or in the classroom too. So that's usually what I use as the introduction. And then I'll show you what I used, if I can get it to work. I followed up, here it is. I just done this recently with a sorority chapter meeting. And then the other one was for National Student Employment Week. So pretty recently. So I led with the spending game as the icebreaker. And then I used the next set of information to kind of introduce what I had been asked to provide. But it's really hard, I think, to jump right into this information. So that's why I really like the spending game. No dollar amount, super easy, can be fun, can be, funny stories shared. And then leading into this information. And I always like to talk about how I can be a resource because maybe we're going to talk about some tough things, and I want to make sure they know that they can come to me outside of the workshop or outside of the classroom if there's something that they're worried about or that's concerning them. So I talk about what financial counselors do, and then I try to put a funny meme on there just to kind of lighten the load as well, and help them understand what I can help them with, or what financial counselors, financial coaches, a financial educator, how we can help. We're here to help, and we'll help with whatever they need help, however we can help them. So this is probably my most frequently used resource for basic financial education, and this would be with all audiences. Um, you can access these resources electronically. While I think their printing budget is gone, but I think they still have some that you can order. The toolkit, I'm not sure that you can get in hard copy anymore, but I really like the booklets. Yeah, I think it's written from a sixth grade literacy level. So it's really, I can use it with almost anybody with the booklets, even someone with English is not their first language. They can still follow along because I refer to the animals or the colors. And then we can all still be part of the workshop or the class. I use the toolkit, I use the booklets, and then they also have guides to go along with the toolkit that are specific to different audiences. So I think the newest one is for military service members and their families. So there's a lot of great information that you can use. Oops. And then I don't go through all the books, but I have them on a table for them to take, and encourage them that I also have them in bulk so I could also provide them. But I talk to them about what they can use the booklets for, to start pulling their information together. Sometimes I don't like the title of the booklets, but I tell them like, this is what you're going to use. I show them how the worksheets, how it opens up. It'll talk about what the tool is for, show them the worksheet, and then they can close it and it gives them additional information. So I just kind of introduced the booklets. The first one's pulling your information together. The second one's specifically about debt and where do I find what I owe. Because sometimes I've noticed debt and credit, like those two terms kind of get confused by a lot of students. So we kind of talk about that a little bit, especially the prioritization. We talk about that tool. And then credit, which is the most popular, I think, with young adults. And then savings, which is kind of like the first booklet, but it's from the perspective of saving for a specific goal, which sometimes is a little bit easier to introduce the information, why we're doing the work of pulling all of our information together, what income and resources do we have to use, and what all do we have to spend, what are our bills, where do we need to spend that money. And then I show them just, I think, a couple tools from each of the booklets. And sometimes, depending on what I was asked to cover, we might go through the specific tool and see where the conversations go from there. And I will tell you, each audience is a little bit different as to what they want to talk about, what they find most helpful. But I think just even going through the introduction to the booklet, the tool, is a pretty good thing to cover in any kind of class or workshop. And then kind of leads me to what I want to continue to talk about. I usually show them a couple of tools to talk about cash flow instead of just using monthly numbers. So when do you have access to your paycheck? When do you have to pay your bill? Can we get them lined up? Saying how maybe you have enough money throughout the month, but it's the timing of it that can cause some late fees. So that can lead to other things too. So looking at kind of weekly totals and that monthly total, and then the same for spending. And then talking about where do I pull all this information from? I know that, working in this space, it seems kind of easy, but I have this conversation quite a bit, like explaining, okay, this is how I get my transactions. This is where I go to get my transactions. And especially for students, like it's beyond its checking account, it's their credit card account, it's their Venmo account, their Cash App, Apple Pay, um, all the different ways that they pay for things and share expenses now. It's so much more than just their transaction account. If I just have them pull their transaction account, we're missing like 3/4 of the picture. So kind of had to expand that conversation, kind of judging how people are responding to what I'm talking about. And this one is the debt log. Sometimes we talk about student loans as part of this, just depending. And then pulling that information together to a budget. Like, this is what I have to work with. This is where I need it to go. Do I have any left over? Can I save a little bit more? What decisions could I make? What things could I change up? And then prioritizing if I don't have enough money, or could a financial counselor help me with that if I don't know exactly which ones I should prioritize, or what would happen if I wasn't able to pay something, and who can help me navigate those decisions. And then this, especially as students, um, not just thinking about spending less, but thinking about earning more, like part-time jobs and different things. Which I don't know. I think most people maybe focus on the spending less, but I try to talk about both and balance those. And I always use myself as an example, or my kids. So, and then thinking about what expenses led to creating debt in the past will help you kind of think about, how do I prepare going forward? And then also with unexpected. So the first one was like seasonal, and then this is unexpected. And an easy way to kind of figure that out is, well, what happened last year? Oh, okay. Because it's really hard to figure out what's going to happen that I don't plan on, right? And this is for a specific goal, then they can kind of figure out how long they have, how much they need to save. And almost everyone has emergency savings, or they need to get a new computer or a new phone, or they want to take a trip or something. Maybe it's even paying rent. So we can talk about that too. And then I always leave with credit, because that's probably the most common questions that I get. And so I just refer them to two resources as an example of how I could be helpful. And then talking about, this is something that I look at all the time. So don't struggle, check in with me, and I'll get you connected to good, high quality, non-commercial, unbiased information as much as I can anyway. And so then I always leave it on here so they know how to get a hold of me. And then it's kind of a funny picture because my daughter's bigger than me and she can pick me up.
Awesome, awesome. Carolyn, I thank you so much for going over those quality resources that you have. I would just share with Mike and Shelley that about a year ago, I was talking to Carolyn and we were just having a conversation. She's like, "Well, I got this money game because I was looking for something to do at an FCCLA conference that I thought kids could be engaged in." And she gave that to me, and it was amazing. Like everybody was so engaged and just really deep diving into thinking about financial issues. And so I was like, people got to know about this. So I just love it, and I appreciate you and all that you do for our our people at Iowa State University, my students for family consumer sciences education, and outside of our world. You do so much to help people. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Mike or Shelley, do you have any um, comments or questions?
How
Oh,
long
yes.
has, oh, sorry, Mike.
Go ahead.
So how long, Carolyn, would you say that Iowa State's been using this spending game? Because I think the University of Iowa adopted it for a half credit financial, personal finance course. Um,
Oh, just the spending game itself?
Uh-huh.
Oh, I do not know. I just use it as an introductory activity of a like in 1 week, like one assignment in 1 week
Okay.
of a 3 credit class. So, but then I
Yeah.
take it to a little bit of everywhere that I use
Mhm.
it. So I know the original spending game has been around for several years.
Yeah.
And I
That's
don't know if maybe someone has adapted it to an online.
I think
Um,
that's what happened because the this half credit course was an online course. So it was
mm,
kind of a filler for a lot of kids,
mm-hmm,
students. And then when I was a financial literacy specialist there, we kind of used something similar, where
mm-hmm.
they decide what kind of budgets they're looking at and so forth and so on. And so very similar. So I'm gonna have
Mm-hmm.
to touch base with my former coworkers and try and have them help me remember what that was. So yeah, but
Yeah.
I was thinking that you were using the money game. It was through it came across on one of our Financial Fridays. A vendor or something has something called the money game. So that's what I was thinking that you
Mm.
use, but
I don't know. I'm always watching for other activities. So if you figure it out, please send it to me because I'll
okay.
start using it right away.
Well, you don't have to, but I was just thinking, oh,
I,
I wonder if that's what Carolyn's presenting
I
about.
prefer
Okay.
not to create any wheels. I like to take the wheels that exist and work
Right.
very well and then adapt them a little bit for my particular audience. I find that works
Absolutely.
better for me.
Absolutely. Yeah. We don't like to recreate the wheel, do we?
No, no, I don't.
I get it. Mike.
Are you still able to get those resources?
I had been ordering them in bulk for a very long time. So I have stacks of them in my office. I think the electronic, like anything that already existed, is still on the CFPB website. Um, I know for a while, if you went to consumerfinance.gov, it was like the file 404 file not found, but all the underlying information was still there. So I keep checking. It's still there as far as I know. I don't think they're adding to it though. I know they haven't printed for a while or shipped for a while, but I had been collecting for quite some time. So
Hmm.
I think the electronic versions are still great. I think I really do see the students like those smaller booklets and they'll grab, some of them want one for each month, or, oh, my sister could use one of these, or my friend has been talking about this. We're gonna go through this together. So I do really like having something in hard copy that they can leave with, even if it's something I printed out. Um, I don't like them to leave like, oh, I know if they're like me, like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go look that up online, and then I don't. So if they leave with something, they're more likely to probably use it and then check in with me. Because I do get lots of referrals. They're like, oh, so and so met you somewhere. They said it's okay if I connect with you. I'm like, yeah, absolutely, that's great. So it always makes me feel good.
For sure.
Mhm.
One thing, Carolyn, I don't see the two resources in the chat. I must have maybe came on. I don't know for sure what happened. I don't, mine are not in the chat. If you would put those resources back in the chat, I would appreciate it. I don't
Oh,
know,
they're
Mike and
sitting there. Let me
Shelley,
see.
can you see it?
I don't see it.
Sorry, you should have said something in the
Oh,
beginning.
there they are. There they are. Awesome.
Sorry, so yeah, you have the PDF, the Word, so you can adapt it and use it however you want. And then I showed you what I use most commonly, but sometimes I'll use the spending game and then move into that first job financial checklist, depending on what I've been asked to provide. And again, the first job financial checklist is another adaptation of something I found from the Consumer Credit Counseling Services of San Francisco.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us.